Buki Jukshin Meto Chon Rira Linji Nyende Genpati Sangye Shindu Nikte Uwargi Jokun Hamdak Shingla Japarshu Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kanirya Tayami Chiram Soki Choknama Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushingi Pesanaki Jola Penshir Sange Juparshu Chiram Soki Choknama Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chujingi Pesanaki Jola Penjir Sange Juparsho Chiram Soki Chognama Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushingi Pesanaki Jola Penjir Sange Juparsho. So before we start class 4, we're going to do our meditation. By reviewing the 6 steps, Lord Maitreya's 6 steps of how our suffering begins and how we keep it going. So we'll take 5 minutes. Come back to the room. 3 long exhales. Sending out whatever wisdom you have gained to all the beings who are in need of it. When you're ready, open your eyes, stretch, move around if you need to. It's been a long day of classes. We'll get a nice reward of a good night's sleep at the end, let's hope, in a couple of hours. So please just hang in there. So we're doing the last class on wisdom, as it is spoken of in the Bodhisattva's way of life. Excuse me. It was itchy nose. Thank you. So we've been talking about where does our pain come from and where does other people's pain come from. We've been talking about wrong ideas. We've been talking about how we ultimately exist. It's kind of where we ended the note earlier this afternoon. And we ultimately exist as nothing more than an idea, right? So then that begs the question of, well, what about the raw data of a person? Is that also just a projection? Is that also just a concept? Is even the raw data of a person a projection? Once you realize that the things you are labeling, that the thing that you are labeling is empty, me, the next question is, because we think of me as a whole, right? What about my parts? What about the raw data? So we do the onion skin thing. We go down and down and down as far as we can go, down to more and more subtle levels of me and who we think we are. So we flip back and forth, right? We peel one label off. And then we look at the next one. And we peel that one away. Oh yeah, that one appears to be just the same as every other one. What about the next one, right? So we keep going down further and further and further. Till we get to really like the question of, well, what about my very existence? You know, okay, me, the whole, is that just a projection? Is it just a concept? We look at that. What about my parts? You can start with your fingers, your hands, your toes. Okay. Is there anything self-existent about this being a hand, or is it just merely labeled hand? By convention, right? We all agree it's a hand. Then you can take the hand. Well, what makes up a hand? It's like I was talking about the car. What if somebody had all of their fingers cut off? Would it still be a hand? Is it something I'm merely labeling? Or is there some self-existence? What about the finger itself? What about what makes up the finger? What about the skin, the muscle, the flesh, the bones? Are they your finger? If you just took a little piece of it, are they your finger? What about the molecules? And you just keep going down and down and down. Even the label molecule, where did that come from? Right? Somebody taught it to us. And you keep looking further and further and further. And you can keep dividing it, and you can keep looking. And will you ever find anything that's self-existently me there? And so you can logically think about it now, but it's an incredible exercise to do in meditation, because you really begin to understand and see how you're like a puzzle and you're just putting pieces together to make a bigger picture. But what about our very existence? Is that also a projection? Yes. Different beings perceive the same data, the same information that's coming in different ways. For example, I was sitting on my porch just now, and I'm hearing all this noise in the forest just on the other side of the fence, and it's like, I'm like, what is going on over there? Who is there? It didn't smell like the javelinas. And so I was wondering what all this squeaking and everything was going on. And I got up to leave, to go to the truck. And all of a sudden I see this tail running off into the woods, right? And it was a coatimundi. They felt threatened by me. They had, data coming in, raw data. They saw something, fear, and they ran off into the woods. I saw them and was like, oh, that's cool. There's coatimundis over there, right? So even each of us in this room may see things radically differently. That's why we get in arguments about things, right? Because we see things differently. And that's why a holy being could see you as an angel, even if you do not see yourself. The raw data is the same, but the perception or the projection is different. So Master Shantideva splits the 9th chapter into 2 sections based on 2 kinds of emptiness. The emptiness of the whole person, or me, right? And the emptiness of my parts, my shape, my color, my mind, my 5 senses, all of those sorts of things. He's already proven to us that the whole is empty, right? I mean, are we convinced of that? And this can lead to perceiving ourselves as an angel. Right? That as a whole, you are not self-existent. So that means that you are not fixed, right? And your projections are just forcing you to see yourself the way you do at the moment. But now he continues on to address colors, shapes, forms, and whether or not they exist on their own, independent of our projections. The day you perceive emptiness directly, you will see the emptiness of yourself as a whole person. You will see that directly, not just intellectually as we are now. But you get to this point by thinking about it intellectually. It's like priming the generator or a pump. You have to get it ready and get the mind into a place of thinking about these things. And so we think about it intellectually. We meditate on it intellectually. When we have an interaction with somebody, or something that arises that's like, well, where did that karma come from? We can step back and think about the emptiness of it. And a lot of times we can then pinpoint what in the past created this thing ripening at this moment. So we get to this point by intellectually analyzing the emptiness of our parts, our arms, our thoughts, all the bits and pieces that are ourselves. So there are two kinds of emptiness. Say gansak, gidakme. Gansak, gidakme. So Gangsak is a person, and Gidakme is, I'm going to just give it to you literally, of self-existence, and me is not. It's a negative. So it means the lack of a self-existent self-nature of a person or of you. So person is, as a normal person conceives of the self. That's what we're talking about here. Whole and independent of your projections. How we normally think of me and how normal people think of me. Some of us may be beyond how normal people think of me. We don't, but we used to. It's the inborn automatic karmic seed of a self as self-existent. And as we die, there is this automatic reaction to grasp toward the thing that we believe is self-existent, toward that me that we think we're going to lose in the moment that we lose our body. And that's why it's so scary, because we identify so closely with this form that we believe when we die that we go out of existence. The I goes out of existence. And so if we can get to a point of understanding, both intellectually, and have that push us over into the direct perception of emptiness when the first thing that we see is the emptiness of yourself, we can break that cycle there. Because we know we are not our bodies. We've gone through it logically. Right? Am I my body? If I were my body, then everybody who saw me would know who I was. But I'm not my body. And I'm not my mind. We are just a collection of karma ripening. And we place this label upon it. So when you look at yourself and you're aware of yourself, it's because you're looking at all of your parts, right? It's just like, I have a pen, but it's just like looking at a pencil. We look at the eraser, we look at the tip where the lead is, we look at the shape of it, and we put all those pieces together, and we label it pencil. Somebody else might label it some other way. And they might not even know that it's something to write with. Might be just to hold your hair up, right? So when we're looking at the sum of the parts, we're conceiving it as me. And we're forced to conceive of those parts as a human because of our past mental imprints, of our past seeds. The second kind of emptiness he talks about is, say, chuki, dakme. Chuki, dakme. So this is, chu is dharma or thing, Dakme is not self-existent, and the key is just an up. So it's the lack of a self-existent self-nature of your parts. The first one was of our whole, and the second one is of our parts. So Chuki, existing thing, is referring to our parts of our body and our mind here. The contents of the mind extending to everything it perceives and experiences. So the ultimate raw data, if you've divided yourself into two, you've decided, I want to keep saying decided, you've divided yourself into body and mind. Right? And we're looking for the ultimate raw data that is the body and the ultimate raw data of the mind. The lower schools hold to the self-existence of raw data. They say the body is a collection of tiny particles. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Atoms. The things we're composed of. They say these are self-existent. And if atoms are then self-existent, then the whole that they make up must also be self-existent. But if the atoms are not self-existent, then the whole also must not be self-existent. It doesn't quite make sense to me, because if the atoms are making up something, even if the atoms are self-existent, they're already parts to a whole. And so that whole is dependent upon those parts. So this doesn't quite, I don't know. I don't know if anybody else got that or not. Ultimately, atoms are not self-existent. You can break them down into their parts. And you can break their parts down into their parts. You can always find smaller parts that they depend on. And your mind is just taking certain parts, from atoms up to arms and legs and noses and ears, and organizing them into a concept. Now, I remember for me, when I first heard this, what came to mind was a drawing of Pablo Picasso's, which had an eye up here and another eye down here, and the nose was somewhere over there, and the mouth over here. It was very cubist. But what did my mind do? Oh, there's a face. It wasn't organized like any other face I had ever seen. But my mind put it all together and said, oh, there's a face. We're organizing it into a concept. There are no ultimate small particles. There is no particle that you cannot divide into a top of the bottom particle, and the bottom of the particle, and the top of the particle, etc. Down and down and down. They would still need to have parts. There is no such thing as a self-existent particle, independent of our projection of it. So therefore, they can't make up the objects in our world. Our karma is what creates all the objects that we experience. And then the next one is, well, your mind is a collection of instances of awareness, which is called, or which are called, a mind stream or a stream. So just as atoms are believed to be the building blocks of our body, present moments of consciousness are the building blocks of our mind. The mind is a concept applied to a collection of moments. The mind is a concept which is applied to a collection of moments. A collection of moments of awareness, of consciousness throughout our life, right? The collection of all of these moments throughout our conscious life is what we call our mind stream. And we conceive of that as me by our mind. And this all comes about through those little wily things, those little seeds again, right? From past karma, we project that. We project the concept of mind onto those moments. And we can project the concept of me in our mind from those moments. And that's why we have a mind. Have you ever sat down in meditation and gone looking for your mind? Can you find it in any physical place? And if you're looking for your mind, who's looking? Isn't your mind looking for your mind? I mean, it's really an interesting thing to do. It's, you know, to go looking for your mind. Sometimes you'll find it in the refrigerator or on your bed. So the raw data of a present moment, of present moments grouped together, is conceived of me as my mind and me. So what about the raw data of the present moment? Does it exist independently, all by itself? It also has parts, right? It has a beginning, a duration, and an ending. The present moment, it's gone. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. Is there a present moment? Is there a past moment? Is there a future moment? Or are these all concepts and projections that we have? So if the present moment of consciousness has a beginning, a duration, and an ending, it's got parts. And those parts have to have parts. So there is no absolutely self-existent building block of the mind. Each part of the mind has parts. Ad infinitum. You cannot ever find a place where there are no parts. Therefore, the mind is empty of self-existence. You know, sometimes they'll say, yeah, the mind is empty. I feel like it's really important to stress of self-existence. What is it empty of? Our minds are not empty, hopefully, but they are empty of self-existence, right? So we're forced to take the parts and conceive of them as a moment of consciousness, which is preceded by a previous moment of consciousness, which is the seed for the next moment of consciousness. And we call that our mind stream, me and my mind. So what really provides the raw data of all existence for every level of mental and physical objects? Projections forced on us by our past karma at every level, regardless of whether it's labeled a glass or a label on parts of the glass, the bottom, the side, the top, the ring, the opening. You know. It still functions. And on that basis, it's real. We're not saying it's not real. We're not saying that it doesn't function. It functions. It's real, but not how we think of it being real as self-existent. This is what the years and years of teachings and the centuries of Buddhist teachers have been trying to get us to understand, because that's where all of our suffering comes from. So what? What possible benefit is it to us to think of the world in this way? That this is not self-existent. Because then we can create a Buddha paradise. Isn't that enough? If it's all a projection, we can change our behavior. We can plant different seeds for the future and create actions that create our future karmic ripenings that will be sweeter than anything we have now. We can plant the seeds to have an omniscient mind so that we can really help other beings. So there's this famous phrase, and one that has gotten repeated many, many times and on the debate ground, and I want to share it with you. Say matak, machepar, tane, pe, teme, jup. Matak machepar, tane pe, teme, jup. If the raw data doesn't exist at every level of subtlety, how do you establish a thing? So matak machepar. Matak is like, don't analyze. Machepar is like, don't examine, don't analyze. The word or term. Sema is a valid perception. And drup is established existence. So we're talking about, if we don't examine it too closely, if we, with our valid perception, we establish it with a word or term. See, what is the...
Can you translate it?
Yeah. I'm just going to check one thing. So hold on one second. So let's go on for a minute and I'll come back to that, okay? So all objects in our world can be established as existing through a reasonable perception. We think of them in a certain way. We think of the glass in a certain way without analyzing its ultimate nature. There is nothing wrong with that, right? We can use it, we can call it what it is. If I ask you to bring me a glass of water, we have some communication going on, right? And this is how we normally think of things. That they exist, we establish their existence through a reasonable perception, through a valid perception, right? And we then think of it in a certain way. And we don't analyze if it's empty or not. We don't analyze its ultimate nature. Right? So this is how we normally think of things. If you just don't analyze, if you just let it be, if we don't look too closely. Right? Matak machepar, if we don't examine it, if we don't analyze it. The simple, unexamined raw data of this particular cylinder, right here, they exist. The atoms exist. It functions just fine. And even the Buddhas see an unexamined world of things that exist out there. It's a valid perception. It's not an hallucination. You're not dreaming it. You're not crazy. The question is, does it function the way you perceive it to function? So at the time you go looking for the thing, the glass that you've labeled, when you go to analyze it, you don't find it. So the raw data, the thing that gets labeled, what's coming into your eye, right? You're seeing a certain shape, form, color, whatever it is, and it's going into your eye. That's the raw data. Before your mind does anything with it, right? If you go looking deeper into that, into the thing that gets the label after your mind has taken it and said, oh, that's a glass, and there's water in that glass. I hope she doesn't spill it. You will not find it. You will not find what you're looking for. A self-existent glass. So, is the cup this bit here? I mean the glass? Is it this round bit here? Is it the cylinder? Is that the glass? Is it the bottom? Is it the fact that it can hold liquid? A glass? I mean, a water bottle can hold liquid. It's not the same. It's a cylinder. It has a top and a bottom. But we make a distinction between them, right? When you're putting a term onto something and looking for the raw data, you will never find it. That self-existent thing that says, glass, 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 to you when you analyze it. When you take things apart, you're seeing things in a new way. I just had this image of, in Star Trek when they, beam them up and then they become all these little tiny, their body becomes all these little tiny particles and then they're gone. When you take things apart, you see things in a new way. And that is the new label that you put on it. And then you look at that and you won't find anything that's self-existent there either. So you can tear apart things in different ways, this way and that way. But when you look for the ultimate data, the ultimate raw data, like the atom, or a moment of consciousness, what do you find? You come up empty. You come up blank. There is nothing there. And that blank is emptiness. No raw data, no atoms, no moments of consciousness from its own side. So you're tearing apart your projections, actually, is what you're doing. You're not getting to the crux of it yet. It's just your projections that you're taking. Are things any less real? When you go looking for the raw data, when you go looking for the atoms in this glass, does it make the glass any less real? I can drink from it. It can hold water or something else. If you go stand on Highway 10 out here in Bowie, are the cars and trucks any less real? Because you're putting together information, data in a certain way and putting a label on it. So what's the point of this worldview, right? Planting seeds for the future. To have a perfect body and a mind and the love and compassion of an angel. To go beyond the pain of suffering, aging, illness, and death. So, is it possible that we can eliminate suffering in every living being? Master Shantideva says, suffering ultimately will be eliminated by the powerful antidote. At the root is the misperception of the true nature of things. Because it's a misperception, it's inferior to the correct view, which blows it apart. So we said many things are the root of all of our suffering in our life. But it gets down really to one basic thing, is believing that things are self-existent. Our belief that atoms are the building blocks for our body. These self-existent atoms that have no parts, right? Our belief in self-existent things causes us to do things that hurt us and hurt others. Right? We do misdeeds to obtain what we want, or to keep what we want, or to get rid of what we don't want. And then we think these things are self-existently desirable or undesirable. That person is desirable or undesirable. The pain that we experience all comes from our ignorance in seeing things as existing from their own side, independent of our projections of them. So as we do misdeeds, we're creating certain causes for meeting painful and karmic projections in the future. As we're doing good deeds, we are also creating causes for meeting blissful, happy karma in the future. And that's why nirvana is possible. Because you have the ability to stop your ignorant beliefs in self-existing things. And Master Shantideva then says, the truth will always win out in the end because it's more powerful than lies. So we've been talking about me and mine. We've been talking about things that we want, things that we don't want. What about these things? Do they even exist as we think they do in the first place? We look for it. The thing that we deny, the gotcha. Kind of like, that word, it's like we grasp to something. We got it. It's like, I gotcha. And it's not even there. There's nothing in your hand that exists self-existently. It never did exist. It never will exist. And it doesn't exist in the moment. Something that is independent of your projections. What's the famous ACI example of this? A two-headed purple elephant rampaging through this room at this moment, right? It doesn't exist, never could exist, and never will. The thing we deny, the gotcha, is something that could exist self-existently from its own side, independent of your conceptions. It's a group of parts that you conceptualize as self-existent because of a self-existent, the cause of a self-existent result. So we spend our life chasing gotchas, whether they be in another person or in an object, and this is what causes our suffering. And Shantideva then says, remember, it's not just me conceiving of the collection of all the parts in a certain way. We don't have a choice in it. It's forced on us by our past seeds to conceive of parts in a specific way. And emptiness, I know I've been saying it over and over all day, right? Emptiness is the fact that there is no self-existent thing. There is nothing in the world which is anything until you think of it in a certain way. That's forced on you by your past karma. Right? I can't automatically think of this as Manjushri's sword, and it be the sword. I am forced to see it as a pencil. Dang. I can write with it, so that's wonderful. But if I could cut through my mental afflictions with it, that would be even more wonderful, right? So the fact that there isn't anything in the world that is not your projection, caused by your past karma, is emptiness. And emptiness is a synonym for ultimate reality. They mean the same thing. So why is it so important that we understand clearly and precisely this object that we deny? Master Shantideva says, one would never be able to grasp how something was devoid of being a thing with encountering that thing it was, which one imagined it to be. So first we have to find the thing that we think exists before we can even begin to think of it being devoid of self-existence. So until we can identify that thing we thought was there, you can't recognize that it doesn't exist. And with that, Master Shantideva says, that's my wisdom that I can share with you. Take it and use it. Change your world. Help others. Take personal responsibility. That's why there's a Bodhisattva vow that says, not to think that if you need to stay in the suffering world to help others. It's again like if you have an illness, you can't help someone else. You have to get out of suffering to know how to show someone else how to get out of suffering. So it's not like you're leaving them behind, but you have to know the path your way yourself. You have to be able to light that path and know how to take another along that path. So don't think you have to stay in the suffering world because everybody else is suffering. No, you need to get out of it so that you know how to do it and can show others how to do it. And have lots of toolboxes of how to help them. Lots of different tools. So the meditation is 15 minutes per day trying to identify the imaginary object that emptiness is empty of. Let me ask you a question. What about karma? Is karma self-existent? Does it function? Appears to, right? But it's not self-existent. What about emptiness? It's empty too. What does that mean? Go into your meditation and look for that. What is emptiness empty of? Because we talk about emptiness like a positive thing. It is a lack of something. And that's our class for tonight. It's an early evening, short class.
To this, you need to stop the class.
Well, we're an hour early tonight, so it's just barely 8 o'clock. Any questions, comments? I love Master Shantideva. It's like so cool. Well then, let's take our recently thoughts on emptiness. The emptiness of ourself, the emptiness of our parts, the emptiness of our world, the emptiness of this room, the emptiness of nothing existing without our putting it together. And the possibilities that opens up for us. And what we can create out of that and send it out to the world. Nicole? Chuching ne to drum, re-rubbing chi yente gembadi, sanke shingdu nikte urwagi, joku namda shingla chuparsho. Nidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami DK Woko Sunam Yeshe Soksokshing Sunam Yeshe Lejungwe Dampar Kuni Toparsho. May we all see emptiness directly if we haven't yet, as soon as possible. So we were discussing what time to start class tomorrow, and nobody had any preference either way. So I'm going to say, since it's Sunday, let's start it at 11, as we had planned. So 11 o'clock Arizona time. And we're going to dive into logic. Oh boy. Dive into logic tomorrow. And we're only going to do half of that logic class, and then we'll continue it next weekend on Friday night. So we'll just bite off half of it tomorrow.
So is it 11 to 1 and 3 to 5?
We only have one
Just
class,
one class tomorrow.
only one class, so it's just 11 to 1. Yeah. So thank you for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you for teaching.